The member for Mwea, Honorable Mary Maingi, will be asking questions to the Cabinet Secretary of Agriculture and Matters Livestock to provide details on the status of the implementation, as well as specify the timelines within which the ministry intends to revive Mwea cotton ginnery following legalization of the commercial cultivation of the genetically modified pest-resistant cotton variety in 2019 after trials at the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Organization Karo Center in Mwea. This question will be replied for the Departmental Committee on Matters Agriculture and Livestock. The Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Moses Wetangula, is in the chamber this afternoon. I now hand you over so you can follow up on the live broadcast of the National Assembly. Enjoy your viewing and good afternoon.
Waheshimiwa na tuombe. Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu, ambaye kwa hekima na wema wako umeteua nyadhifa za viongozi na mabunge kwa ustawi wa jamii na utawala wa haki wa wanadamu, tukusihi utazame kwa neema nyingi sisi watumishi wako ambao wameridhika kutuita ili tutekeleze shughuli muhimu za jamhuri yetu. Twakuomba uteremshie baraka zako sisi tuliokutanika hapa, na utujalie tuyatende na kufikiria mambo yote yatakayofikishwa mbele yetu kwa njia ya haki na uaminifu, ili utukufu na sifa zako ziendelezwe, na ili kustawisha amani, ufanisi na heri ya nchi yetu na wale ambao haja zao wamezikabidhi mikononi mwetu. Amen. Majority and minority leaders. In the old days, when the division bell rang, you would see the whips racing out to go and look for members. Now we have quorum to transact business. I didn't say anybody raise out though. Clerk.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages.
Honorable members, I wish to convey a message from the President on nomination of a person for appointment as a member of the National Gender and Equality Commission. Honorable members, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 42, I wish to convey the following message from His Excellency the President regarding the nomination of a person for appointment as a member of the National Gender and Equity Commission. In the message, honorable members, His Excellency the President conveys that in exercise of powers conferred on him by Article 252B of the Constitution and Section 11(6) of the National Gender and Equality Commission Act 2012, as read together with Section 3 and 5 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act, Act number 33 of 2011, he has nominated Dr. Margaret Karungaru for appointment as a member of the National Gender and Equality Commission. The President now seeks the approval of the nominee by this House. Honorable members, Standing Order 45 provides that upon receipt of notification of a nomination for appointment, such a nomination shall stand committed to the relevant departmental committee for consideration. In this regard, I hereby refer the message from His Excellency the President, together with the CV, the report of the Public Service Commission, and other testimonials of the nominee to the Departmental Committee on Labor for consideration. Honorable members, it's important to note that Section 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2012 provides that the committee to which such nomination is referred, notably Section 11(6) of the National Gender and Equality Commission Act 2012, provides for a lesser period, being 21 days. In this regard, the committee should undertake approval hearings and submit its report within 21 days, as provided for in the National Gender and Equality Commission Act. The law, however, allows for an extension of this period should need arise. In view of the foregoing, honorable members, the committee is expected to immediately commence the approval process, notify the nominee and the general public of the time and place for holding the approval hearings. Thereafter, upon conclusion of the hearing, table its report on or before Wednesday, 5th April 2023, to enable the House to consider the matter within the statutory timelines. I thank you.
Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, March 15, 2023, the afternoon sitting. 1, report of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect of the following institutions and the year ended for the year ended 30th June 2018 and the certificates therein. Institute of Human Resource Management and Masai Mara Technical and Vocational College. 2, reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year ended 30th June 2019 and the certificates therein. Runyenjes Technical and Vocational College and the Institute of Human Resource Management. 3, reports of the Auditor General and the financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year ended 30th June 2021 and the certificates therein. Tana Waterworks Development Agency, Laikipia University, Kenya Industrial and Development Institute, Bandari Maritime Academy, Southeastern Kenya University, Machakos University, IDB Capital Limited, Kenya Nuclear Regulatory Authority, Samburu Water and Sanitation Company Limited, and the University of Nairobi Enterprises and Services Limited. 4, reports of the Auditor General and the financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year ended 30th June 2022 and the certificates therein. Kisii Water Supply and Sanitation Project, ORI 011/KE/21. B, Trilateral Development Corporation in Kenya, Water and Sanitation Sector Project, credit number BMZ 201365352-Lake Victoria South Waterworks Development Agency. C, Kenya Livestock Commercialization Project Loan number 2000565 and 2000566, State Department for Livestock. D, Microfinance Sector Support Credit Project, credit number CKE 300401E and CKE 601001E, the National Treasury. E, Nairobi Sanitation Output-Based Aid, OBA Projects, IDA Grant number TF014251 and number TF0A5607, Nairobi City Water and Sewerage Company Limited. F, Financing Locally Led Climate Action Program, credit number IDA 690TF B6810-KE P173065. And G, Financial Sector Support Projects, IDA credit number 5627-KE, the National Treasury. H, Support to Water and Sanitation Services in Peri-urban Area, loan number BMZ 2013.6543.6, Ardhi Waterworks Development Agency. I, Nairobi Rivers Basin Rehabilitation and Restoration Program, Sewerage Improvement Project, Phase 2, AFDB, loan number 2000-2000347, and ADF loan number 21001500405550, Ardhi Waterworks Development Agency. I, Nairobi Water Distribution Network Project, credit BMZ number 2020.82.527/KV26833, Ardhi Waterworks Development Agency. And lastly, the Northern Collector Phase 1, additional rehabilitation and development of the network, Ardhi Waterworks Development Agency. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. The Honorable Beatrice Elachi, Select Committee on the National Government Constituencies Development Fund. I don't see Honorable Elachi. Any member of that committee? Just to lay the report on the table. Majority, in the interest of time, you can do that for them.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Although I think, Honorable Speaker, it's important that we mention to the chairs of committees, at least at 2:30, all chairs and vice chairs of committees should be in the House. And, Honorable Speaker, it is only out of respect for the office of the Speaker.
5 minutes to 2:30.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker should find them in the House.
Mr. Speaker cannot be sitting waiting for chairs and vice chairs of committees or even members.
Yes.
The House rises at 2:30. So let notice be served to all our chairs, Honorable Speaker, so that those who are not available can also relinquish their positions to those who have time to commit to the House.
Before you lay the document, Honorable Andai, what is it?
Mr. Speaker, I just want to agree with the Honorable Ichungwa, the leader majority, on this matter of the attendance of House sittings by chairs and vice chairs of various House committees. Mr. Speaker, it's always been a tradition in this House, at least since the advent of the new Constitution, that chairpersons and vice chairpersons of committees must be physically present in the chambers when the House commences its sitting. Mr. Speaker, it is now taking a new direction, this idea of committees being left to, if I may say, fend for themselves. Because the committee members can only get direction from their chairs. Yes. And if a chair is not prepared to lead his committee or her committee, then they should say so and give room for others. Okay? Otherwise, this idea of abdicating responsibility every now and then is going to leave a very, very bad precedent in this House, Mr. Chair. I want you to put your foot down, Mr. Speaker. And I mean all chairs, including those who chair oversight committees, audit committees, who are from my side of the coalition. They have to be here. They have got no excuse.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you,
Minority
Mr. Speaker.
To all chairs, the French say noblesse oblige. Nobility carries obligations. When you are given a responsibility, it has attendant obligations. In fact, majority and minority leaders, if the chairman of committees were responsive to time of the House, we would never be sitting here to ring the bell for quorum, because they alone constitute more than enough members that constitute quorum. So proceed, and I would advise you to crack your whip where necessary.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Order. Order.
I hear, Honorable Speaker.
Go
Honorable
on,
Speaker, we shall indulge our chairs, but today being the last time, we are indulging them. Honorable Speaker, even myself, I do get late, and because we also have other responsibilities for our constituencies. For instance, this morning, I was not in the House, but I made sure even if my deputy was not there or the chief whip, at least I asked a chair of another committee, Honorable, to be intimidated by anybody. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House. Today, Wednesday, March 15th, 2023, on behalf of the Chair of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, report of the Select Committee on National Government Constituency Development Fund on the list of nominees to the National Government Constituency Development Fund committees for 3 constituencies. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Next order. Yes, Honorable Kamren, what is out of order? Can you give Honorable Kamren the mic?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought, Mr. Speaker, it is in order when you are accused, you be given chances to defend yourself. Being the chair and vice chair, it is good to be heard because we have been present, Mr. Speaker, and nationally we shall look like we are not been present. We have been present, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Kamren, we know you are present. The roll call doesn't have to be physical. Every time you enter the chamber, your presence is automatically recorded, and the roll call is with these clerks. So we know who is here and who isn't here. Notice of motion, order number 6.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Majority will have to go the whole hog.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Again, on behalf of the Chair of the Select Committee on National Government Constituencies Development Fund, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House adopts the report of the National Government Constituency Development Fund on 3 constituency committees laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, March 15, 2023, pursuant to the provisions of Section 43, subsection 4 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act 2015, and paragraphs 5, 2, and 10 of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Regulations of 2016, approves the list of nominees for appointment to the following 3 constituency committees of the National Government Constituency Development Fund. 1, Garissa Constituency, and I see the member for Garissa is here. Mbere North Constituency. Narok East Constituency, I see the member for Narok East is here. Honorable Speaker, again, it is customary for this House that if a member whose list of nominees is being approved by the House is not in the House, that matter stands dropped, because we cannot pass your list and you are not present in the House yourself. So notice be served to the member from Mbere North, who is not in the House now, that at the time we get to this motion, should he not be in the House, then his list will stand dropped.
Thank you. Honorable Member Mark Mwenje.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to give notice of the following motion, that aware that lack of access to ownership of productive assets, in particular to land, is one of the very serious sources of economic and social insecurity for Kenyans. Further aware that many communities, particularly in rural areas and informal settlements in urban areas, depend on land for their production and livelihood, and therefore landlessness affects the ability to secure basic needs such as food, shelter, and clothing. Concerned that for urban low-income dwellers, the only way of accessing land to put up their dwellings has been to take up residence on land that is unfit for human habitation. Aware that the Bill of Rights in Chapter 4 of the Constitution guarantees every citizen the right to adequate housing and reasonable standards of sanitation, noting that there are many squatters who have settled on land that belongs to either absentee landlords, unadjudicated land, public land, or community land for long periods of time, with some disputed while others undisputed. Concerned that the issue of land settlement in many urban areas, particularly in the informal settlements, has remained unresolved, with numerous persons remaining squatters. Further aware that Section 7 of the Limitation of Actions Act 2010 provides for the right to claim for settlement on certain land after the prescribed period, while Section 134 of the Land Act 2012 empowers the national government to implement settlement programs and provide for process for doing so. Recognizing the need for the Ministry of Lands to hasten the process of identifying parcels occupied by squatters where there are no disputes from any party, this House resolves that the government develops and implements a policy for regularization of the settlement of squatters within a period of 2 years in accordance with the provisions of Part 9 of the Land Act 2012 to address the challenges faced by squatters across the country. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Mwenja. Before I go to the next order, Honorable members, I wish to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's gallery 4 staff members from Makueni County Assembly. You may stand to be acknowledged. You are welcome to the House of Parliament. In the public gallery, I wish to acknowledge the presence of the Star Sheikh Academy from Mavoko, Machakos. On your behalf and on my own behalf, I welcome our visitors to the House of Parliament. And next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
Questions. We start with a question by Honorable Mary Maingi, MP. Member for Mwea.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to ask my first question in this August House.
Yes, Kamket, what's out of order? Give Kamket.
Mr. Speaker, we recently passed the amendment to standing orders. When are we likely to get the CSS to come and answer these questions?
Honorable Kamket, if you are past, then you should have known the effective date. Because the motion had an effective date, which is later this month. We forgive you for not knowing, but you are presumed to know everything you pass here. Honorable member, proceed to ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to provisions of Standing Order number 42A5, I rise to ask the following question to the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and Livestock Department. 1. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide details of the status of implementation and specify with timelines within which the Minister intends to revive Moya cotton ginnery following legalization of commercial cultivation of genetically modified pest-resistant BT cotton variety in 2019 after trials at Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization, CARO, Center in Moya. 2, what steps has the ministry taken to ensure that when the ginnery begins active production, locals of Moya constituency will directly benefit in terms of employment, opportunities, and corporate social responsibility initiatives? I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Member Mary Maingi. Next, question 040, Member for Kibwezi East, Honorable Jessica Mbalo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity. And pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 42R5, the following, I rise to ask the following question number 40 of 2023 to the Cabinet Secretary for Energy and Petroleum. Number 1, can the Cabinet Secretary provide details of the number of public utilities, including primary and secondary schools in Kibwezi's constituency, that are not connected to the electricity, and the steps being undertaken to connect them to the national grid? Honorable Speaker, number 2, to outline the measures that the ministry has put in place to either service or replace faulty and obsolete solar PV systems that were installed to supply uninterrupted power to various public institutions in Kibwezi's constituency, and particularly primary schools where power is critical for the implementing of the digital learning program. Number 3, Honorable Speaker, that the Cabinet Secretary provides a status report on electrification projects for other areas in Kibwezi's constituency that are not connected to electricity, and the plans being undertaken to ensure that the areas get connected to the national grid. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Jessica. Question 044, the member for Teso North, Oku Kaunya.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 044 to the Cabinet Secretary for Education. Could the Cabinet Secretary, 1, consider incorporating the competence-based curriculum into the 844 curriculum as a way of addressing the challenges that have affected the smooth transitioning from 844 to CBC system? 2, could the Cabinet Secretary confirm whether the ministry will meet the full cost of implementing the CBC, particularly the purchase of resources necessary for carrying out the CBC lessons? 3, state the measures that the ministry is taking to ensure that all the 1.2 million grade 7 learners transition to junior secondary school. Number 4, Honorable Speaker, could the Cabinet Secretary explain the fate of the infrastructure that was early established in secondary schools using public funds in readiness for the junior secondary schools, which are now domiciled in primary schools? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Kaunya. Question 045, member for Yatta, Honorable Robert Basil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question 045 of 2023 to the Cabinet Secretary for Education. Could the Cabinet Secretary explain the criteria applicable to deployment of principals in junior secondary schools? Question number 2, when will the teachers who have served as principals or deputy principals in acting capacities beyond the statutory 6 months be substantively appointed in those positions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Basil. Question 046. The Honorable Member for Bahati, Irene Njoki. Can you give the Honorable Member the mic? Yeah, there you are, Mheshimiwa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 42A5, I rise to ask my question to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and National Administration. Could the Cabinet Secretary explain the steps that the government has taken to fight against the proliferation of illicit brews in Bahati constituency, including steps being taken to eradicate their production and sale? Question number 2, could the Cabinet Secretary explain mechanisms put in place to enforce proper disposal of illicit brews nabbed by police during swaps to ensure that the product does not find its way into circulation? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Njoki. Statement by the member for Kitui Central, Makali Mulu.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 43, on behalf of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Kenya branch, I wish to make a statement regarding Commonwealth Day 2023. Honorable Speaker, Commonwealth Day 2023 was marked on Monday, 13th March 2023, throughout the Commonwealth, across the CPA's 9 regions and 180 parliaments and legislatures. The day is the annual celebration of Commonwealth of Nations, often held on the second Monday in March, and aims to unite 2.5 billion Commonwealth citizens in celebration of their shared values and principles, and in pursuit of a common future centered on sustainability and peace. The theme of the Commonwealth Day 2023 was Forging a Sustainable and Peaceful Common Future, which combines the active commitment of the Commonwealth to support the promotion of peace, prosperity, and sustainability, especially through climate action, to secure a better future for the young people and to improve the lives of all Commonwealth citizens. In addition, Honorable Speaker, the year 2023 has been designated the Commonwealth Year of the Youth, and therefore, the Commonwealth Day focus was on delivering opportunities for the people, parliaments, governments, and institutions of the Commonwealth to connect and work together at many levels through a deep-rooted networks of friendship and goodwill, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, this is the first Commonwealth Day since Her Majesty passing on, and the first presided over by His Majesty King Charles III as King and head of the Commonwealth. Further, Commonwealth Day 2023 marked the 10th anniversary of the signing of the Commonwealth Charter, which was signed by Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II on 11th March 2013. Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, I urge all of us that moving forward, Kenya adheres to the theme of the Commonwealth Day 2023 and commits to supporting the promotion of peace, prosperity, and sustainability, especially through climate action, so as to secure a better future for our young people and improve the lives of all our people. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, I take this opportunity to inform the House that one of the top issues on the agenda of the CPA is to the change of legal status of the association from being a charity registered under British law to adopting a new legal status as an international interparliamentary organization. This change of legal status, Honorable Speaker, seeks to enable the CPA continue to achieve its ambitions for the future. I thank you, Honorable Speaker. This statement is signed by yours truly, Honorable Daktari Makali Mulu, Kitui Central, member of the CP Executive Committee and Senior Regional Rep, Africa Region. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Makali. Next order.
Order number 8, motion, report on the consideration of the 2023 medium-term debt management strategy. Question to be put.
Order, honorable members. Order, honorable members. This order was debated and responded to, and is only putting the question, and I now put the question, which is that this House adopts the report of the Public Debt and Privatization Committee on its consideration of the 2023 medium-term debt management strategy laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 9th March 2023, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 15(4) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Standing Order 232A 7 and 8, approves the 2023 medium-term debt management strategy, and B, makes the policy and financial resolutions contained in the first schedule to the order paper. As members of that opinion say aye. Aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, motion, report on the budget policy statement for the financial year 2023-2024 and the medium term.
Chairperson, Budget and Appropriations, Honorable Ndindi Nyoro.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. The report on the budget policy statement for financial year 2023-2024 at the medium term. That this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget policy statement, that is BPS, for the financial year 2023-2024, and a compendium of departmental committee reports.
Honorable Chair, I'm told you should start by saying I beg to move the following motion. Then you move on.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for that guidance. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget policy statement, that is BPS, for the financial year 2023-2024, and the compendium of departmental committee reports on the 2023 BPS laid on the table of the House this morning on Wednesday, 15th March 2023, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 25(7) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Standing Order 232(9) and 10. A, approves the budget policy statement for the financial year 2023-2024. B, makes the following financial resolutions with respect to the BPS 2023-2024 at Kenya shillings 2,252,577,400,000, of which, number 1, executive, Kenya shillings 2,189,181,400,000, of which Office of the Auditor General at Kenya shillings 7,698,700,000. Number 2, Parliament 40,402,000,000. And number 3, Judiciary at Kenya shillings 22,994,000,000. 2, resolves that the allocation of the county government equitable share be approved at Kenya shillings 385,424,616,047 Kenya shillings. Approves the equalization fund at Kenya shillings 7,867,000,000. 4, approves the conditional grant of Kenya shillings 44,000,000,000 316,798,386 as per the fourth schedule of the report, of which an allocation of Kenya shillings, 4.5 billion to the managed equipment service, which is MES, will be subject to the submission of the evaluation report as per the resolution of the House on non-financial matters as contained in the report, which is on recommendation number 32. 5, orders that the second schedule to the order paper forms the basis for the ceilings for financial year 2023-2024 budget estimates. And 6, resolves that the financial resolutions forms the basis for the 2023-2024 budget estimates. C, makes the policy resolutions contained in the third schedule to the order paper, that is bracket non-financial recommendations relating to the budget policy statement for the financial year 2023-2024. Honorable Speaker, I first want to take this opportunity to thank all the departmental committees which appeared before us over last week, Mr. Speaker, to bring forth the recommendations from the various MDAs that they oversight. Mr. Speaker, we have been working long hours to make sure that we meet this deadline. And Mr. Speaker, for the avoidance of doubt, even before I go to the main body of today's motion, Mr. Speaker, we have been in a sprint inside the marathon. We have been working very fast, but also long hours. And I'm sure the majority of the members who belong to departmental committees have been in the same rush. Mr. Speaker, on the onset, because law is made for man, not man for the law, we have decided as one of the recommendations that we have to take this exercise of considering BPS with the seriousness it deserves, because this is one of the main elements that we handle in this House. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I want to make it very clear to all members that in our recommendation, one of the recommendations is to amend the PFM Act, Mr. Speaker, so that we increase the 14 days of the consideration of BPS from 14 days to 28 days, Mr. Speaker, so that departmental committees can get ample time to query the budget ceilings, to query the estimates, Mr. Speaker, of the MDAs that they oversight. Mr. Speaker, also, we have noted that when the departmental chairs appear before the Budget and Appropriations Committee, we usually allocate them around 30 minutes, maximum maybe 45. Mr. Speaker, some of the departmental committees are oversighting very monumental departments and sagas. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is improper that a chair appears before us, then we afford them only 30 minutes. And the reason for amending the PFM, Mr. Speaker, is so that going forward, and especially next year, we'll only be allocating not more than 6 departmental chairs to appear before the Budget Committee in a day, so that we have serious interrogations, Mr. Speaker, because this is a very serious exercise. And therefore, from the onset, that will be seeking so that, Mr. Speaker, we can take enough time to make our budget. Mr. Speaker, in regards to this BPS, because we are now in the process of budget making, there are several considerations that we made as the Budget and Appropriations Committee, and of course, representing this House. One of those issues, Mr. Speaker, that we considered is on the basis of how countries grow. How do countries grow, Mr. Speaker? And especially empirically, using the evidence that is there. Using countries that have, Mr. Speaker, ascended to economic growth. Mr. Speaker, across from ages to the modern economy, one of the elements that make a country grow is, first of all, for a country to explore all the agricultural resources they have and making sure that those economies cultivate every cultivatable acre, Mr. Speaker. On the same breath, economies grow when they realize the potential they have in terms of natural resources. Mr. Speaker, in the allocation of the ceilings that we have done, we have taken cognizance of the fact that our country is endowed. It is endowed in terms of agricultural resources, in terms of arable land. Mr. Speaker, even generally as a continent, Mr. Speaker, we are endowed massively. Mr. Speaker, also, we have a lot of natural resources, which are primary in nature. We have done nothing to deserve them. We have just gotten them, Mr. Speaker, from as natural resources. Mr. Speaker, the second element that every country grows is after considering what they can produce in terms of primary, then realizing that they have to value add every raw product that cannot be consumed in its primary form, Mr. Speaker. Making sure that we add value to the products that we cultivate in our farms, and even adding value to the minerals, Mr. Speaker, that we get almost for free, Mr. Speaker, either underneath or even over the soil in terms of the forestry. Mr. Speaker, for that to happen, that is number 1 and 2, in terms of exploring and exploiting natural resources and also agricultural resources, and also cultivating, Mr. Speaker, in terms of making sure that we add value. That process, Mr. Speaker, requires human resource. That cannot happen, Mr. Speaker, when we do not have a healthy human resource and a skilled human resource. And that is why within this BPS, we have gone ahead, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we take care of healthcare. Healthcare in economic terms, Mr. Speaker, is the maintenance cost of labor. It is the maintenance cost of human capital. That is what, Mr. Speaker, on the health side, they call healthcare. Mr. Speaker, on the same side, for this human capital to be improved, a raw person, Mr. Speaker, a banal person to be improved, they need to go to school. After going to the basic school, Mr. Speaker, they also need to acquire skills. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, in the same breath, we have made sure that we have allocated enough seating to be able to add value to the human resource that you have in the country, and especially by adding value, and especially in terms of tangible, practical skills. And that is why we have given a lot of cognizance to higher education, and especially more specifically to areas around Tibet, which, Mr. Speaker, their main domain is to make sure that we polish the human capital that we have, even as the healthcare, Mr. Speaker, maintains the same human capital. Mr. Speaker, also for other countries that have grown, they have limited their extravagance, Mr. Speaker, and their tastes to the products produced within their countries. Mr. Speaker, across all the economies, from South Korea to Vietnam, and no others, including the very stable economies, Mr. Speaker, they make sure that they match the aspirations of expenditure, Mr. Speaker, of the citizenry by having production lines that satisfy to that extravagance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also, a country which must import commodities because of necessity, then, Mr. Speaker, the equivalent of the necessities that we have to get from outside based on necessity have to be compensated by what we export outside, Mr. Speaker, so that we do not become an economy that hemorrhages foreign currency. Mr. Speaker, in fact, economically speaking, it is more plausible to pay 20 shillings for a product, the money that will remain within the country, than to pay 10 shillings for the same product for money that will take a flight. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, this goes and communicates towards what we were considering as this committee, that is budget, representing this House, in regards, Mr. Speaker, to making sure that we open up production in our country, we satisfy the local demand, and also, Mr. Speaker, we look for markets from far and wide to also export whatever we produce as surplus. Mr. Speaker, I want just to give some few figures. in regards to the expenditure for the current BPS that we are considering. Mr. Speaker, within this BPS, and I want members to go with me, this is an approximately 3.6 trillion budget. Out of that 3.6 trillion budget, 2.19 is going to the executive. Mr. Speaker, among the same 3.6 trillion, around approximately 40 billion is the expenditure for this House, that is Parliament, in regards to development and recurrent. Mr. Speaker, we have also allocated approximately 22 billion shillings to our judiciary. And Mr. Speaker, the remainder is the money that we take to the counties, and that which I have just laid before, or said before, will be approximately 385 billion. There is another element of expenditure, Mr. Speaker, of something we call CFS, Consolidated Fund Services. Consolidated Fund Services, most of the bulk of this money goes into the repayment of debts, servicing our debts, and especially interest rate, without factoring in the net capital borrowing. Then, Mr. Speaker, in this financial year that we are considering, that is 2023-2024, we are talking of approximately unprecedented figure of 991 billion shillings. We are almost crossing a trillion mark in terms of CFS, which majority of it, Mr. Speaker, goes into payment of interest rates. Of course, it also includes other areas, Mr. Speaker, like pensions and the payments to our commissions. Mr. Speaker, on the revenue side, we are also envisioning to collect around 2.56 trillion shillings in terms of ordinary revenue. Mr. Speaker, we are also looking forward into collecting around approximately 330 billion Kenya shillings in what we call CFS. Precisely is around 323 billion, Mr. Speaker, into A&A. These are monies that we receive as government and various agencies of government receive by offering service. Mr. Speaker, on the same breath, we are looking forward into getting grants of around 48 billion Kenya shillings. And Mr. Speaker, now the balance that remains, which is around 720 billion, is money that we are looking forward into borrowing. And this borrowing, Mr. Speaker, majority of it, over 70%, we are looking forward into borrowing internally. Mr. Speaker, I know there is an effect of crowding out, Mr. Speaker, but also in terms of the international financial markets. The international financial markets, Mr. Speaker, in the current scenario have cooled. And Mr. Speaker, when financial markets have got cold, then they are jittery. And when they are jittery, they respond by having very high interest rates. And that is why we are looking more inward than outwards, Mr. Speaker, because the current global rates that we could fetch out there could not be very favorable for our economy. Mr. Speaker, there are a few areas I want to highlight that we considered in terms of laying the basis, and I mentioned some of them when we were considering the supplementary estimates. That is why today I'm not going to overemphasize. Mr. Speaker, the current scenario in terms of our economy, we are still reading through the effects, Mr. Speaker, of the pandemic that has ended, but the effects have not ended. Mr. Speaker, our country is facing a very severe drought and famine. Mr. Speaker, definitely that compounds the issue of inflation, Mr. Speaker. And also, there is another global trend of the strengthening of US dollar, Mr. Speaker, that is making all the other foreign currencies, Mr. Speaker, lose ground in comparison or comparative to the greenback. Mr. Speaker, these are very fundamental factors. And of course, in putting the fourth one, which is what is happening in Europe. Mr. Speaker, because the economy sometimes deals with facts, Mr. Speaker, some of these issues may feel like repetition. It is because the economy we discussed a month ago, it is the same economy we are confronting today. And some of these realities, Mr. Speaker, have not changed. What we have seen, Mr. Speaker, that we need to take cognizance of as this House, as the Budget Committee, as a country, is that when we have shocks, like the shocks that I have mentioned there before, which prolongs for a long time, which takes too long, Mr. Speaker, sometimes interventions may not work. Sometimes policies are the ones that can work. When you have prolonged shock, Mr. Speaker, they then cease to be shocks, and therefore they are not to be tackled through interventions. Then we have to create policies that will confront these kind of prolonged shocks, Mr. Speaker, because they cease to be actual shocks. And that is what we try to do by setting the current ceilings. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to take too long today, but I just want to highlight just a few things. Number one, we foresee an economy that will be growing at around 6% in 2023, which is a good thing, and especially given the fact that the global economy will be growing at a partly around 2%. Mr. Speaker, another fundamental thing that I want to bring forward to this committee is that as we consider the ceilings, we are also considering, Mr. Speaker, the linkages among the various sectors within the economy. That is why we are considering agriculture, MSME, housing, healthcare, digital highway, Mr. Speaker. And because I see the lights are on, Mr. Speaker, on the framework, on the implementation of BPS, we looked at the priorities and also the sequencing. And Mr. Speaker, also the funding priorities, Mr. Speaker, some which will be borrowing, others will be raising internally, and others through PPP. As I wind up, Mr. Speaker, I want to mention 8 things which the members should take note. Number one, we considered aggregation across all the value chains in this budget, because we are not looking at budget in terms of just items. We are looking at value chains. Aggregation and
Give the chair 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Number one is aggregation, which is both in agriculture and MSME in terms of production. Number two is skill development, which I mentioned before, in terms of making sure our TVETs are well equipped to be able to equip skills to the Kenyan youth. Number three, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of JSS, junior secondary schools, and CBC, which we have been able to allocate enough seating to cater for capitation and also to cater for the gaps that there are in terms of infrastructure. Number five, Mr. Speaker, after consultations, even with the executive, and I want members to give some keen eye on this. Mr. Speaker, one of the recommendations that we have made, and it is in tandem with even the executive, is that as we implement the infrastructure funds that is usually given to the Ministry of Education, the bit of implementation going forward will always be channeled through NGCDF. Mr. Speaker, also, on these current ceilings, we have also added Kenya shillings 1 billion towards National Government Affirmative Action Fund, Mr. Speaker, to take care of the funds that our women reps oversee. Mr. Speaker, there is something also very interesting that this House should take note of. The current CDF as a fund is just approximately 44 billion. Mr. Speaker, we have gone forward to raise that base to approximately 53 billion Kenya shillings in the year 2023-2024. Meaning, Mr. Speaker, every constituency will be getting an average of 20 to 30 million additional, Mr. Speaker, to take care of the many needs in our constituencies. Mr. Speaker, we have also been able to amend the ceiling in terms of the roads infrastructure. The ceiling that was brought forward in this House by the Treasury. Mr. Speaker, because we represent constituencies that have got stored roads, Mr. Speaker, we amended that ceiling, Mr. Speaker, for the pending bill in terms of roads, so that our contractors can go back to site, on top of the money we appropriated in the supplementary estimates. Mr. Speaker, the ceiling that was capped by the Treasury was around 55 billion to go into roads. Mr. Speaker, we amended that to around Kenya shillings 70 billion by adding 15 billion to go into road construction. Mr. Speaker, there are many other issues touching in our constituencies and our area of representation, and I beseech my fellow colleagues to go through our report and to go through the other annexures in the report, Mr. Speaker, to be able to take in whatever we recommended. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honorable members, because out of the input you give us on the daily basis, then we are enriched. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Who is seconding you?
Mr. Speaker, I want to call another very deep member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, a PhD in economics, Honorable Makali Mulu, to second.
Honorable Makali Mulu.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, let me start by thanking my chairman for that good moving of the motion. And Honorable Speaker said that this report is very detailed. Honorable Speaker, I would urge the honorable members to take time and read through this report. Basically because, Honorable Speaker, with the time allocated, we may not be able to say, what is in the report. But there are a few things we want to highlight. And Honorable Speaker, just to, as a way of introducing the report, you all realize that we are working under very difficult economic times. So what we call the micro environment in which we are working is also shaky. And that means, Honorable Speaker, as we prepare this budget, there are a number of things we need to note. And it's important that as a House, we keep our eye on the things we are saying. I'll just be adding a few from what the chair said. So, Honorable Speaker, one of the things we have picked as we prepare this, we look at this BPS, is that we realize that a lot of MDS, Honorable Speaker, we are picking a lot of duplication of efforts in a number of MDS. And one of the things we'll be recommending, Honorable Speaker, is that as we now go to the annual estimates, it would be very important for the House to make sure, and most of the departmental committees, to make sure that we don't have any duplication of efforts, so that departments are able to do standalone programs, standalone projects, without having 1, 2, 3 departments addressing the same program. The other issue, Honorable Speaker, which we have picked from our analysis of the BPS, is that the proposal on fiscal consolidation, when you look at the projections, this year the projection is 4.4%, next year is about 3.6%, and then the final year, the outer year in the MTF is 3.4%. So, Honorable Speaker, when you look at the history in terms of BPS, these figures have always been there, the rolling plan, but we hardly adhere to them. So I would urge that now, as we move to the future, this being a new government, it will be important that we stick to the figures we put in the 3 years, so that we don't have every time a rolling figure, and you can't really plan well. The other thing which is important, Honorable Speaker, to check is there is a proposal, Honorable Speaker, where the national government is going to be co-funding programs with the county government, either through conditional grants or through other arrangements. And it is important that, Honorable Speaker, where there is co-funding in terms of the national government and the county government, we should have a very clear implementation framework. Because, Honorable Speaker, we have realized that as a result of having no clear implementation framework, we are not able even to implement most of the projects we put under the conditional grants. So it will be important, even as we approach the annual estimates, that that framework is in place to make sure that once the money is allocated, Honorable Speaker, implementation kicks off immediately. The other thing, which, Honorable Speaker, we have picked from this report, and it is important we note this, Honorable Speaker, we have all been talking about funding of students who join private universities through the normal placement by the central body which places them. And, Honorable Speaker, we have realized that our public universities have excess capacity. And you find in the budget, Honorable Speaker, a lot of money is being sent by the same government to students who have been sent to the private universities. So one of the recommendations we have put forward, Honorable Speaker, is that from this financial year, no money should be sent to private universities unless public universities have reported that they have no capacity to admit students in this country. Honorable Speaker, the other matter, which is critical, is the issue of pending bills, Honorable Speaker. Honorable members, we all know what is happening with the pending bills. It is important that as a country, we seriously discuss pending bills. Why am I saying this? You know, pending bills, Honorable Speaker, the people who are adversely affected by pending bills are our own brothers, our own sisters, the people who fought for us. And Honorable Speaker, you'll be surprised, people have actually died as a result of these pending bills. People have been auctioned, and some, as a result of blood pressure, they end up dying. So, Honorable Speaker, it is important as a House, we help this country address this problem of pending bills. Because unless we do that, Honorable Speaker, we continue having problem. I see my time is running out, Honorable Speaker. The other issue, Honorable Speaker, is important. Is the issue of the human-wildlife conflicts, Honorable Speaker, where a lot of damage happens, Honorable Speaker. And we have always been talking about the compensation program. So in this policy, Honorable Speaker, we have said that this year, it is important that resources are allocated so that we have what we call wildlife compensation insurance scheme, so that when our people have problems with there's a conflict, they are compensated. And last but not least, Honorable Speaker, is the issue of the medical equipment leasing program. We are saying before it is now allocating resources, it is important we have a clear framework between the county governments and the national government, because this program, Honorable Speaker, has been there for many years.
Thank you, Dr. Makali. I now propose the question, honorable members, which is that this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the Budget Policy Statement, BPS, for the financial year 2023-2024, and a compendium of departmental committee reports on the 2023 BPS, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 15 March 2023, and pursuant to the provision of Section 25(7) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Standing Order 2329 and 10. A, approves the Budget Policy Statement BPS for the financial year 2023-24. B, makes the following financial resolutions with respect to the BPS. 1, approves the national government's budget ceiling for the year 2023-24 at 2,252,577,400,000,000, of which 1, executive, Kenya shillings 2,181,400,000, of which Office of the Auditor General 7,698,700,000, 2, Parliament 40,402,000,000, 3, Judiciary 22,994,000,000, 2, resolves that the allocation of the county government equitable share be approved at Kenya shillings 385,424,616,047 shillings. 3, approves the equalization fund at 7,867,000,000. 4, approves the conditional grants at Kenya shillings 44,316,798,386 shillings as per the fourth schedule of the report, of which an allocation of 4.5 billion to the Management Equipment Services MES will be subject to the submission of the evaluation report as per the resolution of the House on non-financial matters as contained in the report, recommendation number 32. 5, orders that the second schedule to the order paper forms the basis for the ceilings for the financial year 2023-24 budget estimates. And 6, resolves that the financial resolutions forms the basis for the 2023-2024 budget estimates. C, makes the policy resolutions contained in the third schedule to the order paper non-financial recommendations relating to the budget policy statement for the financial year 2023-24. I thank you. Honourable members, before we open a debate, allow me to go back to messages and deliver the following message from His Excellency the President. I'm sorry it came late. Honourable members, this is a message from the President on nomination of a person for appointment as the chairperson of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Honourable members, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 42, I wish to convey the following message from His Excellency the President regarding the nomination of a person for appointment as chairperson of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. In the message, honourable members, His Excellency the President conveys that in exercise of powers conferred on him by Article 252B of the Constitution and Section 10(2) of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2011, as read together with Section 3 and 5 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act, Act number 33 of 2011, he has nominated Dr. David Adang Oginde for appointment as the chairperson of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. The President now seeks the approval of the appointment by this House. Honourable members, Standing Order 45 provides that upon receipt of notification of a nomination for appointment, such a nomination shall stand committed to the relevant departmental committee for consideration. In this regard, I hereby refer the message from His Excellency the President, together with the curriculum vitae, the report of the Public Service Commission. Order. Order, Honourable Member, can you take your seat? It's actually out of order for you to be on your feet when the Speaker is on his feet, and to continue conversing loudly when a message as important as this is being conveyed. I hereby refer the message from His Excellency the President together with the CV, the report of the Public Service Commission, and other testimonials of the nominees to the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs for consideration. Honourable members, Section 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2012 provides that the committee to which such nomination is referred shall consider the matter and table a report in the House within 28 days. In this regard, the committee should undertake approval hearings and submit its report within 28 days as provided for in the said law. Honourable members, in view of the foregoing, the committee is expected to immediately commence the approval process and notify the nominee and the general public of the time and place for holding the approval hearings. Thereafter, upon conclusion of the hearing, table its report on or before Tuesday, 11th April 2023, to enable the House to consider the matter within the statutory timelines. I thank you. We now go back to the budget policy statement. I give the first bite to the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I rise to support this report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget policy statement for the financial year 2023-2024 and the medium term. And Honourable Speaker, as the Chair and the Seconder did note, there's nothing much to say on this because first, this is a very important process, as we said yesterday, as we debated the debt management strategy, that this now forms the basis of the annual estimates for the next financial year. And as we mentioned, Honourable Speaker, this is among the most important business that this House will transact within this session of Parliament, this first session of this year, in consideration of the annual estimates and approval of the budget policy statement. And allow me, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Budget and Appropriations Committee, all members of this committee, and indeed those who also serve in the Debt Committee, because they have worked under very strenuous circumstances to ensure that we have both these reports ready for approval and adoption by the House. And Honourable Speaker, notably, you will see very good recommendations that some of which have been mentioned, especially on the issues to do with giving money that is being appropriated to schools, police posts, police stations, administrative offices in our constituencies, money that is going to the sub-county level to come as conditional grants at the NGCDF fund. Honorable Speaker, this is indeed very encouraging and commendable, and we'll see the actual implementation of projects, because government projects, Honorable Speaker, over time, Honorable Speaker, it has been noted, and even those in government do agree that the implementation of NGCDF projects is much more efficient, and even the value for money is better achieved when you implement such projects through NGCDF. Honorable Speaker, in the last regime, and the Honorable Makali Mulu sat with me in the Budget and Appropriations Committee, we tried to prevail on the then government to allow the construction of what they call, I think, the 10,000 classrooms to be done through NGCDF. And there was a lot of resistance. And these projects dot all our constituencies in our schools. Some at 30%, others 60%, the best probably is at about 85% completion. Most of them are not complete. And the quality of workmanship done in many of those classroom projects implemented under the schools, the Ministry of Education infrastructure program, the quality is not as good as those that members of parliament supervise under the NGCDF committees. And therefore want to encourage that even for police stations, administrative offices, for our DOs or our DCCs, it is better when this money comes through NGCDF. And I note that indeed the committee has made that recommendation. Honorable Speaker, more importantly, again, Honorable Speaker, when I served as the chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, and those who served with me who are still here, like the Honorable Sarah Correa, will bear me witness, successively in all our reports from 2017 October, we did indicate that there were no resources that were being committed to the Big Four agenda. And that is how the Big Four agenda, Mr. Speaker, came to die a natural, slow, but painful death to the people of Kenya. I am glad that the Kenya Kwanza administration under President William Ruto is not just about talk. That when we talked about the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, that through the office of the president, they have been able to narrow down to the value chains that will actualize this bottom-up economic transformative agenda. And they have identified the value chains that you see that the committee is now asking the MDAs, our ministries and departments and agencies of government, to ensure that they work together with the National Assembly, to ensure that the annual estimates that come in are value chain oriented. And if I dare mention, Honorable Speaker, some of those value chains are in areas that touch the lives of the people at the bottom of the pyramid. The leather industry, the dairy industry, textiles, Honorable Speaker, with the growth of cotton and ginning and processing of cotton, tea, rice, edible oils that have become largely out of reach for many Kenyans, Honorable Speaker. Building material sector, Honorable Speaker, that has a huge ripple effect on the economy. And also mining, and I did see the CES mining talking about support for mining at the very local level, so that those people you see every now and then being buried in Nyanza, in parts of Western, in mines that people work in that are not safe, can be supported. And of course, the blue economy that will go to support many of our people that work around our lakes.
1 minute to wind
Just
up.
1 minute, Honorable Speaker, to conclude that those who work around our lakes and oceans, Honorable Speaker, a huge and rich resource for our country that has not been exploited, that we shall now focus on those areas, Honorable Speaker. And I want to support, Honorable Speaker, and urge the House to support this report and indeed be keen as we engage with our MDAs during the annual estimates later this next month, the month of April, towards the end, and May. We ensure that indeed the National Treasury and MDAs abide to this resolution to ensure that our estimates are oriented to those value chains. Honorable Speaker, as I speak to our colleagues, to also encourage the people back in WIADS to now identify projects within the annual estimates that will also be beneficial to their areas and also be beneficial to those who are keen on business. With these value chains, then you know where to direct your attention to if you're in business. If you are a prospective investor, then you now know the focus that government is focused on and be able to focus on those areas. With that, Honorable Speaker, I support.
Rachel Nyamai, Kitui South. She's not here, she's top on the list. Omboko Milemba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to speak on the BPS. I must first congratulate the Budget Committee for work well done, and more so appreciate the government of the day for one thing, that every Wednesday we have private members' motions which do come on the floor of the House. And many times there's a tendency for the House to feel that it's just a talking shop, but that's not the case, because I remember some of the proposals that have been put in this budget are ones that were brought on the floor by private members during the Wednesday motions. And one of them is one that regarded the fact that there was so much money left in the Ministry of Education for infrastructural development, and which later was used as per the interest of the minister per se. And I'm happy to hear from the Chair of Budget that finally that particular area has been restructured, and with the agreement of the executive itself, that money be channeled through the NGCDF. I remember in the last parliament, I did bring a motion on the floor of the House concerning that matter, because that money was not used properly. And even when they had a higher allocation of about 1 million per class during the late Magoha's classes that were constructed across the country, still those classes remain unfinished to date. The Leader of Majority has spoken about them. So I think that's a very good step. Also, one other good policy brought forward is the policy that increases the NGCDF itself in terms of the amount that will be allocated. But this is a challenge to the House, that if we have been given that mandate to carry out this, then we have to work very hard so that we showcase. Remember, this is an area where also we have many distractors outside there who don't believe sometimes in our work. So I would want to urge the House that as this happens, then we have to go back to our constituencies, God willing, and do a very good job so that we prove ourselves that this is a better channel of getting money to the ground, not really devolving, but getting money to the ground, especially money that comes from the national government for effective use and efficient use. Honorable Speaker, there is also a very good policy made on the issue of roads. The roads money which has been increased, and that increment should be able to facilitate most of our roads that are back down there to start working. All this, including the monies that have been allocated to several value chains, is supposed to trigger the economy to start working. Because if there will be contractors on the roads, if there will be construction work going on in school infrastructure and other areas, then we should see now more money circulating within the economy and within the country, and this should excite the economy so that we start growing once again and the people can start feeling that there's flow of money within the system. Another policy, Honorable Speaker, that I must laud is the issue and special attention that has been given to the JSS, which is currently grappling with many problems that concern taking off. And we have been told by the chair that enough money and good ceiling has been allocated for the JSS, that's junior secondary school, and CBC curriculum, so that the children who are in school and are languishing there without teachers, without materials, without capitation, can now enjoy their education, given that education is not only compulsory in Article 53 of the Constitution, but it's also free to be provided by the government. But more so, like I did mention on the issue of what the private members' motions always do urge government to do, this was a fantastic one, Chair. Honorable Speaker, that finally we are removing the students from the private universities, yet our own universities are dying because they don't have money. I'm happy to hear that these private universities will not get the students who are otherwise absorbed by the public, and therefore growth of the public universities. With those very few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank you and support.
For Charles Onchoke Bonchari. You know, members, when you log in to seek the permission of the chair to speak and you decide to walk out, it is better to disengage your card so that you don't clog the screen against members who are legitimately in the House. The Honorable Robert Mbui. Yes, Honorable Gikaria, what's this?
Honorable Speaker, maybe, I don't know, because in the morning I was here, same spot, and I put my card very early. I was just checking with the clerks. I was told I'm up number 6, again, just disappeared. So I am at intervention, it is not showing. Honorable Speaker, I think we also need, because as Ishoma was saying that we should be coming here by 2:30, I was here actually 5 minutes before that. And when you don't get an opportunity to speak again, it becomes, and of course, Honorable Speaker, we really want to support the agenda of this. So, it's important for them to check. If the cards are not working, then we could be told.
You are nowhere on the screen, Honorable
Yes,
Gikaria.
but it is on the 2 actually, blinking.
You probably should relocate to a different seat. I will take your point of order as a constructive solicitation to speak. And I will consider you in that regard. Robert Mbui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope my time hasn't been taken because there's very little time and so much to say. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I just want to say that this House has powers given to it by the Constitution. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it's important that Kenyans note that today we are dealing with a budget policy statement. We will come and deal with the budget of the country. And Mr. Speaker, I'm saying that because there seems to be sometimes some of us who forget that the power of the past is actually vested in us as members of National Assembly. And therefore, that means that there is no one else outside this House that we can go to solicit for development other than to fight for it and put it in our budget. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying that because those ones outside there are the ones that should be begging us for opportunities for development, not the other way around. Mr. Speaker, our strategies as a House must be Wanjiko Mweni friendly. And Mr. Speaker, I'm saying that because we have been elected as representatives of the people. We have the opportunity to deal with the budgets. So we must ensure that the prioritization of this government is things that are going to be beneficial to all our voters. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter which part of the country one comes from. All Kenyans have the same problems, the same challenges. The economy, when it does bad, it is doing badly in the north, it is doing badly in the south, it is doing badly in the east, it is doing badly in the west. So we must all rise up and work together to ensure that we hold this country to account. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of inflation, it's unfortunate that January last year, inflation was at 5.4%. January this year, it was at 9%, and it is rising. Mr. Speaker, I even sometimes wonder, when they talk about 9% increase, that would mean that something that was 100 shillings would be costing 109 shillings. The truth is, it is almost 50% in my estimate, because something that was 100 shillings is probably 150. So we have a problem of inflation, and that is something that we need to deal with. Mr. Speaker, maybe one of these reasons, because I've looked at these strategies here, and I've been asking myself, where is it that the common Mwananchi's problems are being addressed? Where is it that the cost of living is being brought down? Where is it that the cost of unga is being brought down? Mr. Speaker, maybe that's why we have a date with Destiny on 20th, next week on Monday, because we are not dealing with the problems of the people. We must ensure that we deal with the problems of the people. I've looked at the 5 pillars. You know, 5 pillars touted as a bottom-up economic strategy, and it is a replica of the Big 4 agenda. And let me point out, one of the pillars is agriculture. On Big 4, they called it food security. One of the strategies, the other one, is housing and settlement. Big 4, they called it affordable housing. The other strategy is healthcare. Big 4, they called it universal healthcare.
There is a point of order from the chair of the committee.
Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering, is it in order for the honorable member to eloquently state that this House has the power of the purse, and therefore we can do anything around budget and the economy? He is a member of this House himself, and therefore that responsibility is actually on his shoulders, actually being a leader. The same mouth, Mr. Speaker, within a second, then he says he has a date with Destiny on 20th to seek for the justice of Kenyans again in Maandamano. Mr. Speaker, is it proper for the member to mislead Kenyans? Is it in order, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, I will ignore and continue. That is the kingpin of Central Kenya speaking. I don't want to answer him. Mr. Speaker, let me just go straight to the second schedule that has all these amounts set out. And I want to go to the one that talks about basic education. In the basic education schedule, you can see that the amount of money that is set aside for basic education, that is primary education and secondary education, which has GSS also, is 19.7 billion for capital expenses. So I'm wondering, how is that enough for us to build classes, labs for art, labs for home science, labs for pre-technical, labs for sciences, labs for ICT? 19.7 billion. Really, Mr. Speaker, I think there is a big problem in JSS. It's not been addressed. I think that's one of the things that I thought this government would at least try and do. So, Mr. Speaker, we will keep talking about it because, on the floor of the House, we have the opportunity to talk. But when it comes to voting, I'm certain that the majority will always have their way. But Kenyans must know that the issue of JSS, if it is not addressed now, it will continue haunting our children, and our children will continue to suffer. Even the teachers.
Your time is up, Robert. Honorable members, before I give the next member, the Corrigendum number 006 of 2023 on the message from the President on the nominee for National Gender and Equality Commission. I'm advised that we inadvertently committed the nominee to the Departmental Committee on Labor. In fact, it should be the Departmental Committee on Social Protection, and therefore it's so ordered. Next member will be the Honorable Joseph Emathe, Turkana Central.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chair, for giving me this opportunity and also to give my input on the BPS for 2023-2024. Honorable Chair, I want to congratulate the chairman for the committee for bringing us to speed on the ceilings, the priorities, performance, and the projections in the BPS. Honorable Chair, I want to thank him so much also for considering that CDF has one of the lowest allocations in this country, knowing that CDF is one of the vehicles of development, actually physical development in this country. Honorable Chair, I also want to thank him so much for...
Yes, Honorable. Yes, Honorable Member, what is out of order? Give the Honorable Member the microphone.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to know when you ceased being the Speaker and became the Chair. What is the difference? I need to know. I need to be guided.
The difference is like day and night. The Speaker is not the chair of this session. He is the Speaker of the House.
Honorable Speaker, thank you so much for your guidance. I think my honorable member was asleep while knowing that I was giving that title to the Honorable Chair for Budget and Appropriation.
Remember, for your future guidance, when you debate, you don't address anybody other than the Speaker. So the chair of the committee has his accolades, but you address him through the Speaker.
Fully guided, Honorable Speaker. I rise in regard to Section 15, subsection 2A of the Public Finance Management Act, Honorable Speaker, that there is the need for the chair of the Committee, Budget and Appropriation, to help us understand how much of the budget has gone to development, because the Public Finance Management Act gives us the understanding that there must be a minimum of 30% of the total expenditure that must go to development. And Honorable Chair, I give that with the understanding that recurrent expenditure is unsustainable. And it is in that regard that the chair was able to give us the understanding that 14 days to look or to delve into the BPS is a shorter period of time. And maybe if we can give it 28 days, that will be an opportune time for us to understand how much of this has gone to recurrent. And it will help us in understanding or giving much impetus on understanding what goes into recurrent. Your Speaker, that is what I wanted to give, and just as an input, but I want to support the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Aseka Huisero.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Let me also join colleagues in supporting this budget policy statement for the financial year 2023-2024. Mr. Speaker, budget policy statement lays the framework of the government of the day on critical matters, one being the revenue projections, the sharing of revenues between national government and county government, and lastly, how the government intends to grow the economy. Mr. Speaker, let me thank the departmental committees that did input into this report. Thank also the Budget and Appropriation Committee that also burned midnight oil to ensure that we have this report. Looking at this document, Mr. Speaker, the current administration focuses its energy on 5 pillars. 1, agriculture transformation, where it intends to ensure that production of food is scaled up to fight and to secure the country against food insecurity. In this document says that the government wants to input and to ensure that farm inputs are available to farmers. This government wants, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that markets for these products are available. It wants to do value chain addition on specific items. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the report, they talk about the rice, production of edible oils. They talk about, Mr. Speaker, tea and coffee, to value chain add on these items so that farmers can get value for their money. Mr. Speaker, this document also talks about healthcare, and its focus is also on NHIF to ensure that it is based on households rather than individuals. The document talks about construction of specialized hospitals and equipping them, like the cancer centers, just to help Kenyans who are suffering, to reduce their cost of medication from moving from rural areas, maybe to seek specialized care in towns. So, Speaker, this document also talks about digital infrastructure. The government wants to automate government services to ensure that these services are under one platform for efficiency and effective service delivery. But doing this, Mr. Speaker, there are challenges that I think the guys who are dealing with these matters must also be aware of. We have erratic weather conditions that, Mr. Speaker, may affect the intent to produce enough food. The Meteorological Department has given warnings on the erratic weather conditions. Rainfall may not be enough. So as much as we are looking at increasing production, we must also focus more on irrigation so that we ensure that that item is attained. Mr. Speaker, two, there are also issues with depleted foreign exchange, which will affect the economy. This must be addressed to ensure that the stability of our shilling, Mr. Speaker, is guaranteed. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the allocations given to basic education, allocations given to CDF, it gives us hope that going forward, transition from 844 to CBC will be seamless. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable David Gikaria.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity, and I want to thank you also for my consideration. Honorable Speaker, let me first of all thank the Chair of the Budget Committee for good work that you've done, and true to the fact, Honorable Chair, the budget sometimes I feel for the members. They sit throughout so many hours, of course, listening to over 20-something chairs who have been given various times to be able to consider their request. And I want to thank the Chair. When we started with Honorable Ishongwa then last term as the Chair of Budget. But I think equally Honorable Dede Nyoro is equal to the task and is doing a very good work with his team. Honorable Chair, the first thing that the Chair did comment was about the time frames. And it is true, Honorable Chair. For example, I sit in the Environment Committee, and we have never even been able to visit some of the projects that have already been mentioned within the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change, Forestry, and Mining. The other bit is, for example, in mining. We have never. So by the time you're given that kind of a BPS and you have no rough idea whatsoever of what they are talking about, then it becomes important, as the Chair was indicating, that we have enough time, that the members of various committees can be able to interrogate their ministries effectively, and we can be able to give, as and when you're asked to allocate some amounts for a certain project, effectively you can be able to say, yes, these projects require some additional funding. It is because you have been able to visit. But with the new Parliament, Honorable Chair, and committees being new in their work, and having not visited some of these projects, Honorable Chair, then that is when what the Chair again was talking about, wastage, that much of this money goes to waste because the committee has not had enough. Maybe after a year or two, once the committee is in place, then we can be able to fully interrogate some of these projects that different ministries do indicate and ask for funding. Honorable Chair, the other bit is on matters to do with the BPS, Honorable Chair. It is that, for example, the mining, as it has been mentioned, Honorable Chair. Mining could be the game changer in this country in terms of revenue collection, in terms of employment, in terms of the economic development of this country. And when we had an opportunity to sit with the Minister for Mining, Mheshimiwa Mvurya, he did mention that in the past, his mining ministry was referred as a mining that just give a licensing ministry. They just give a license and they sit back. And they were not able to do anything more than that. But Honorable Speaker, I want to agree with Honorable Mvurya that if some money and enough money is given to the ministry for it to, first of all, undertake, this government did spend, not this government, but the previous government did spend over 7 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker, to do something they were calling aerial geosurvey, to understand how much minerals do we have in this country. And we spent a staggering 7 billion. Honorable Speaker, with that kind of an expenditure, and the reports are out telling us where we have different, this country have over 970 different minerals. Honorable Speaker, if we could be able now to get that money to be able now to follow the circuit, then this country will be the biggest beneficiary. We'll be going on record as one of the greatest mining country in the world. Out of the 970, Honorable Speaker, we have a mine that is in this country and only found in this country and very expensive. So we want to agree with the value chain as it has been indicated, but we are at the same time requesting the Budget Committee to consider that value chain, because that is where every government goes wrong. You identify a value chain, we request, can you give it enough funding and enough resources for them to be able to achieve the potential that is within the ministry. Lastly is about forestry, Honorable Speaker. Forestry is another area.
Honorable Women Rep Trans-Nzoia. Give her the mic. There you are.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to appreciate and also support this report that has been brought by the Committee of Budget. I want to appreciate our President, Mr. Speaker. I felt it could be so bad if we end this without somebody having appreciated the President, especially from this group of women reps, because we've been allocated 1 billion extra, which is very important for us as women reps. As you can see, Mr. Speaker, it has been very difficult for women rep to come back to the House, just because the amount that we've been allocated all along has been very little. So at times when we are doing our projects, it is not, it cannot be seen on ground because what we have is very little. So I want to take this chance to appreciate the President and also appreciate the committee for the work that they have done. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Anthony Oluoch. What is out of order, Ruku? Hold on, Honorable Anthony Oluoch.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise on point on order number 95, that the members are repeating themselves when it comes to the debate. So I think it is high time to call the mover to reply, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Yes. I have given the floor to Anthony Oluoch. Let him finish and I see if I can call the mover. Anthony Oluoch, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I want to thank the Budget Committee for coming up with this Budget Policy Statement report. And allow me first to comment on and agree with the Chair of Budget on the question of timelines. As we were engaging with our respective committees, I do agree that the timelines involved in these ought to be expanded from 14 to 28 days. And one of the experiences that we had as a committee, looking at our respective departmental committees, is that the respective sagas focus too much on the budget ceiling at the expense of policy. And for these reasons, other than the recommendation that we expand the time, I think this committee ought to have gone a step forward and say that we need to unbundle budget policy statements from the budget ceiling so that these issues are considered separately and that they are able to be processed in a manner that allows policy to be determined as policy as the anchor for budget, and that budget ceiling and the crunching of numbers be able to be done also separately. Secondly, I want to agree that the medium-term strategy that was adopted yesterday, I think this House resolved that it ought to be attached with the budget-making process. And I think this is an important thing, and I do recognize that the Budget Committee has given recognition to the fact that the medium-term management strategy ought to be attached to the budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, I, however, do wish to ask that this committee should have gone a step further and noted that in attaching debt in terms of how debt, public debt, is defined. And this is a point that I wished to have raised yesterday, but it is still very germane today. We ought to have gone further and recommended in terms of policy that public debt ought to be reopened in terms of its definition. The prioritization of foreign debt as a priority of one of the things that we need to offset from our budget every year at the expense of, for example, pending bills is something that we ought to look at. Public debt, in my view, ought to be redefined in such a broad way that we are able to look as debt that is incurred in the course of government engagement. This includes public pending bills, which, if unlocked, would be able to go into the economy. The manner in which we have defined public debt right now allows us to send foreign exchange and our revenues to the foreigners at the expense of what we do in our country today. I also want to support the resolution that the budget ought to engage in terms of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, in terms of when administration blocks are being built, when police stations are being built. And if you look at what happened in the social interventions and the stimulus package during the last administration, billions of shillings were spent by government in making very substandard schools, making very substandard desks, which ought to have been attached to CDF. CDF is so circumscribed in the manner in which you do procurement, in the manner in which you isolate projects that you do, that it actually goes way beyond what government and county governments do in terms of the manner in which they undertake and implement their projects. And so I do recommend, and the last point that I wish to make is the question of equity. When we engage in public debt and talk about foreign debt, there ought to be an understanding and appreciation that when we incur foreign debt, the payment of this foreign debt is done by every Kenyan, so that foreign debt that is incurred ought to go into development of all Kenya's corners of this country, not just Nairobi and its environs, so that Turukana, Garissa, Wajir ought to be having 50% of the money that we borrow in terms of foreign debt, and then the other countries that have been developed before, starting from Nairobi, Kiambu, Mombasa, Kisumu.
Your time is up. Honorable members, I'll seek your concurrence from Honorable Ruku's request that the mover be called upon to reply. As members of that opinion say aye. Aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? Nay. The ayes have it. Ndindi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank all the members through the Speaker for the various contributions which we have had. Even the positive criticism is a way to tell us that there is room for improvement. So I want to thank every member in their contribution, and we have noted all the comments and concerns. Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply.
Honorable members, I will now put the question. Honorable Angela and Jen Kihara, it's actually not very decent to walk out when such an important question like this is being put. Take your seats. Honorable members, I now put the question, which is that this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the Budget Policy Statement, BPS, for the financial year 2023-24, and a compendium of departmental committee reports on the 2023 BPS laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 15th March 2023, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 25(7) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Standing Order 2329 and 10. A, approves the Budget Policy Statement BPS for the financial year 2023-24. B, makes the following financial resolutions with respect to the BPS. 1, approves the national government's budget ceiling for the year 2023-24 at 2,252,577,400,000, of which 1, executive, 2,189,181,400,000, of which Office of the Auditor General 7,698,700,000. 2, Parliament, Kenya shillings 40,402,000,000. Judiciary, 22,994,000,000. 2, resolves that the allocation to the county government's equitable share be approved at Kenya shillings 385,424,616,047 shillings. 3, approves the equalization fund at 7,867,000,000. 4, approves the conditional grants at 44,316,798,386 shillings as per the 4th schedule of the report, of which an allocation of 4.5 billion to the Management Equipment Services MES will be subject to the submission of the evaluation report as per the resolution of the House on non-financial matters as contained in the report, recommendation number 32. 5, orders that the second schedule to the order paper forms the basis for the ceilings for the financial year 2023-24 budget estimates. And 6, resolves that the financial resolution forms the basis for the 2023-24 budget estimates. C, makes the policy resolutions contained in the 3rd schedule to the order paper non-financial recommendations relating the budget policy statement for the financial year 2023-24. Will as many of that opinion say aye? Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Manjala and Kihara, you can now proceed to where you are going.
Order number 10, motion, consideration of nominees for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council.
Yes, Honorable Member. Under what standing order is the order of intervention?
I am raising on a point of intervention, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
As a matter of concern.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, this budget policy statement, among other important motions or programs that come to this House, Mr. Speaker, there has come a routine where members rise to call a mover or a mood of the House, even on an important matter that requires a proper debate. Because of members who do not come to this House. Some of us are loyal, we come to this House, we want to debate, we are cut short, Mr. Speaker, unless we respect such kind of things so that we have time to discuss this matter as a country, so that we want to build us, those of us who are new, so that we become great debaters, than cutting us short on the mood of the House, let's call the mover. This kind of things, Mr. Speaker, will actually limit our faculties and the programs that we think that we need to put in this House, Mr. Speaker. We require guidance going forward, Mr. Speaker, on these matters.
Honorable Joseph, nobody will curtail the growth of your faculties. I can assure you, you will be, you know, when the chair is asked to call the mover to reply, the resolution lies with the House. That's why I put the question. And I heard you say aye for the mover to respond. So you can't You can't have your cake and eat it. Have you called the next order? The chairperson, Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining.
Honourable Speaker.
Honourable Gikaria.
Honourable Speaker, that taking into consideration the finding of the joint committee
Honourable Gikaria, start by saying I beg to move the following motion.
Honourable Speaker, I would like to move the following motion of consideration of nominee for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council. That's taking into consideration the finding of the Joint Committee of the National Assembly, Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining, and the Senate Standing Committee on Lands, Environment and Natural Resources. It is this report on the vetting of the nominee for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 14th March 2023, and pursuant to Article 132(2)(f) of the Constitution, Section 7(4) of the Climate Change Act, Section 3 and 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, and Standing Order 216(5)(f) of the National Assembly, and the Standing Order number 2284(f). A, approves the appointment of the following persons as members of the National Climate Change Council. 1, Emily Mwende Waita. 2, John Kioli Kalua. 3, Professor George Odera Outa. And B, rejects the appointments of Umra Omar as a member of the Climate Change Council. Honourable Speaker, Honourable Speaker, on Tuesday the 14th, as indicated, 2023, you issued a communication from His Excellency the President regarding the nominee as I have read. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to Standing Order 45(1) and the fourth schedule of the Standing Order, the names and CVs, curricula vitae, of the 4 nominees were referred to the Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining, jointly sitting with the Senate Standing Committee on Lands, Environment and Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, on Friday the 17th February 2023, pursuant to Section 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Committee Approval Act number 33 of 2011, the Clerk of the National Assembly did, and the Clerk of the Senate, in writing, invited nominees for vetting hearing, indicating the time and place for holding the approval hearing. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Section 6(9) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, the Clerk of the National Assembly and the Clerk of the Senate, in writing, of the Senate, and placed an advertisement in the print media on Monday, 20th February 2023, inviting the public to submit memoranda by way of written statement on oath or a stroke affidavit contesting the suitability of the nominees. The advertisement indicated that the submissions were received on Monday, 27th February 2023 at 5 p.m. Mr. Speaker, by close of that day, the committee had not received any written statement on oath contesting the suitability of any of the nominees. The Clerk of the National Assembly and the Clerk of the Senate wrote to the respective agencies the EACC, KRA, DCI, HELB, and the Registrar of Political Party, requesting for reports with respect to the nominee on matter touching to integrity, tax compliance, political affiliation, and loan repayments. Mr. Speaker, sir, we received clearance report for the nominee from the Kenya Revenue Authority, the DCI, EACC, HELB, and of course, Honorable Speaker, the Registrar of Political Parties. Mr. Speaker, sir, the National Assembly Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining, jointly sitting with the Senate Standing Committee on Lands, Environment and Natural Resource, conducted approval hearing on Tuesday, 7th March 2023. The nominee were vetted in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, and the National Assembly Standing Orders on their suitability or otherwise for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council. Pursuant to Section 7 of the Public Appointments Committee Approval Act 2011 and Section 7(1) of the Climate Change Act number 11 of 2016, the committee considered various issues during the approval hearing. First, the Joint Committee considered the procedure used to arrive at the nominee. The Joint Committee observed that pursuant to Section 7(2) F, G, H, and I of the Climate Change Act 2016, the President is required to nominate a person for appointment to the National Climate Change Council if that person has expertise and experience in matters of climate change, economic, finance, law, enforcement, and public administration. As a citizen, Honorable is a citizen of Kenya, fulfills the requirement of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, and has at least 10 years' experience in the relevant field. Additionally, Honorable Speaker, the Joint Committee observed that the 4 persons nominated must be representatives of a private sector, nominated by a body representing the largest number of institutions in the private sector. B, the civil society, nominated by the most representative registered National Umbrella Association of Civil Societies working on climate change. C, marginalized community within the meaning of Article 260 of the Constitution who has knowledge and experience in matters relating to indigenous knowledge. And lastly, D, the academia nominated by the Commission of University Education. Mr. Speaker, the Joint Committee, in determining the suitability of the nominee, took into consideration the provisions of leadership and integrity as outlined under Chapter 6 of the Constitution. Further, the committee observed that the suitability of the nominee should be evaluated holistically, taking into account their academic credentials, professional training, experience, background, and personal qualities, as well as the performance of the nominee during the approval hearing, which is very key, Honorable Speaker. The National Assembly Department Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining, jointly with the Sitting Committee on Senate, Lands, Environment and Natural Resource, having vetted the nominee, made the following general observation: that in accordance with Article 78(1) of the Constitution and Section 7(2) of the Climate Change Act 2016, the nominees are Kenya citizens. 2, that the nominees satisfy the statutory requirements on leadership and integrity, having been cleared by the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, KRA, on tax compliance and the Higher Education Loans Board. 3, the nominees satisfy the requirement of Chapter 6 of the Constitution on leadership and integrity. 4, that the nominee have never been convicted in a court of law for criminal offenses in the past 3 years. 5, as stipulated in Article 75(1) of the Constitution, the nominee have no potential conflict of interest. 6, that the nominee do not hold offices in any political party, hence satisfy a requirement of Article 77(2) of the Constitution, in exception, Honorable Speaker, of one nominee, Umra Omar, who, as at the time, was a member of the Safina party, and he had the production of the indicating that he was a member of that. 7, the nominee has never been dismissed from office under Article 75 of the Constitution for contravening Article 75(1), conflict of interest, 76, financial probity, 77, restriction of state officers, 78(2), dual citizenship of the Constitution, and lastly, Honorable Speaker, that the nominee were nominated in accordance with Section 7(2), F, G, H, and I of the Climate Change Act number 11 of 2016. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 3 nominees, Amy Mwende Waita, John Kioli Kalua, and Professor George Odera Outa demonstrated knowledge on topical issues, technical and administrative issues touching on climate change, and have the requisite abilities, qualifications, and experience to serve as members of the National Climate Change Council. However, Mr. Speaker, sir, Umra Omar did not demonstrate knowledge on tropical issues, technical and administrative issues, touching on the indigenous knowledge contrary to Section 7(2)H of the Climate Change Act 2016. Consequently, the nominee lacks the requisite abilities and experience to serve as representative of the marginalized community of the National Climate Change Council. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, is that I urge members to read comprehensively the Joint Committee report of the National Assembly Parliamentary Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining, and the Senate Standing Committee on Lands, Environment and Natural Resources in order to fully appreciate and enrich the debate. I further urge members to adopt the recommendations and of the committee as contained in the report. Honorable Speaker, just to highlight is that it is a joint committee between us and the Senate. The Senate will be discussing the same in the plenary on this matter, Honorable Speaker. And it is true that when the 4 nominees did appear before us, each was given an ample time, 2 hours. We were there from 8 all the way to around 7, actually 8 in the night. And Honorable Speaker, as indicated to that fact, is that all the 3 nominees, that is Amy Mwende Waita, Mr. John Kioli, and Professor George Odera, did demonstrate knowledge of the climate change. And Honorable Speaker, climate change is seen as if it is not being, it is actually the world, currently, it is trending all over the world. And you can imagine, Honorable Speaker, that climate change, if it's not handled properly, the situation that this country is, the situation that the whole world is currently, is the situation that will, and it is going to get worse, Honorable Speaker, if we are not able to address and get members in the Climate Change Council who understands and can be able to bring some meaningful change. And the three actually did tell us that actually climate change occurrences are man-made. It is the human that affects the environment. It is us who are destroying our environment to a point that these days you cannot be able to predict anything about the climate. And they told us that if it is not addressed properly, Honorable Speaker, particularly the emissions by the industrialized countries and the big countries that we always talk about, then we will end up suffering, Honorable Speaker. And one of the issues that this country has excelled again very well, it is on matter of carbon credit. Honorable Speaker, we have planted so much trees. And that tree, it is the recipient of the emissions, as they also give out oxygen, Honorable Speaker. And being a recipient of the emissions by the industrialized world, then we are supposed, as a country, to be actually in Africa, we are the biggest earners, or second biggest, after Congo, because of the trees and the vegetation that we have. But the government does not benefit at all, because we have two options where we have the government can be able to be the biggest earners of the carbon credit, but at the moment, Honorable Speaker, we don't earn anything because that has been taken by individuals. And of course, it is acceptable. Individuals could be able to encourage communities to be able to plant more trees so that they can be able to be earners of that carbon credit. But also the government needs to play a bigger role in earning the whatever is received from the carbon credit so that it can be able to reinvest the same amounts into checking the climate and, of course, handling some of the environmental issues that are happening in this country. Honorable Speaker, the forests, and we were pleased because some of these nominees, when we did put across some of the questions, like, for example, we did put a question about the 15 billion trees, and he said, yes, Professor Odera said very well. But at the same time, he did advise that please, as Parliament, be informed by science. Let us not just be making decisions here based on our hearts and our heads. We should allow science also to guide us in our decision making. And one of the issues that he did speak to, which was saying it's a good idea to have 15 billion trees, but do you know by planting 15 billion trees, then it means you have already covered half of your country. Again now, where will you be taking your people? That is a question that we need to ask. Secondly, he said, assuming at any one time we have attained our 15 billion trees coverage that we ambitiously want to achieve, all of a sudden, and as we are talking now, Honorable Speaker, almost half of our forest has been destroyed because of the forest fires. And these forest fires are not, they are started by the same human beings. Again, we will become the biggest emitters of the same thing that we are trying to avoid. Again, he was telling us we must, as we plant the 15 billion trees, we must put enough measures to be able to address, in case of forest fire, what is going to happen and what are you going to, so that we can be. Honorable Speaker, the President is the chair of the Climate Change Council. His deputy is his deputy chair. So you can imagine how that important is. And that is why one of the nominees did not prove to us that they could be able to go along in that direction. With those, Honorable Speaker, I beg, Honorable Speaker, with those few remarks, I beg to move and call upon Honorable my Vice Chair, Charles Cameron, to second.
Charles Cameron, Honorable Charles Cameron, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to second this motion. Mr. Speaker, has been said very well, as it has been said very well by my chair, that climate change is serious and is affecting us. What is going on in entire republic? The pandatory...
Order, Honorable Achi. Who are you consulting? Order, Honorable Member. Honorable Achi, who are you consulting loudly there? Please, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Speaker. I was saying, Honorable Speaker, that the challenges that we are facing in this country at the moment, it is as a result of climate change. And I want to thank the members of this House for what they did in the year 2016 by coming up with its Act of Climate Change Act 2016, which has established this council so that we can see how we can mitigate the challenges of climate change. Because this is our future. This is our economy. It's affecting our economy. It's affecting our generation to come. So, Mr. Honorable Speaker, these committees, these council members are really very relevant, and they went through the right procedure. They went through the vetting. We followed the due process with the Joint Committee of the Senate. And the report that we are giving out is a clear and fair report that each one got opportunity to express and to answer the questions, and we saw it. So, Honorable Speaker, I stand to second. Thank you.
The honorable members, I now propose the question that, taking into consideration the finding of the Joint Committee of the National Assembly Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry, and Mining, and the Senate Standing Committee on Land, Environment, and Natural Resources, in its report on the vetting of nominees for the appointments as members